For our next session, please join me in welcoming General Timothy Haugh, Commander of the United States Cyber Command, Director of the National Security Agency, and Chief of Central Security Service, for a discussion on the future character of war and cyber operations with Dave Zikusoka, Senior Director for Defense at the Special Competitive Studies Project.
Good morning, sir. It's a pleasure to have you join us today, particularly as you do so from far away. I know it's near midnight where you are.
Yeah, we're having an absolutely wonderful evening. Glad to be here.
Great. I'd like to start by covering innovation for a bit. I'd like to start by hearing your perspective on how innovation is creating new challenges and opportunities in the cyber domain. What are some of the new avenues that are opening up that leaders might not have considered in the past?
So, David, thanks for the question, and I am really excited to be here with you today. As we think about innovation, we think about technology. We're really first thinking about our workforce, and so when I look at our workforce in terms of Cyber Command and the National Security Agency, we bring a highly technical workforce that really has a history of innovation. So how do we take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to us today in terms of generative AI, and what that means for us in terms of putting that into our workflow. With a workforce that has extensive experience working with AI and ML, how do we take advantage of that as we think about really looking at first from a cybersecurity perspective, and then in terms of the totality of our roles and missions, whether that's identifying vulnerabilities in the kit that we have across the Department of Defense, or if it's thinking about how we're generating options across the entire conflict continuum in support of combatant commanders or in support of our policymakers.
Great. What are some of the advantages that America's Innovation Edge gets us? What are some examples you have?
Well, when I think about America's innovation, we start, our industry is really the power of our economy. And so how we think about in our partnerships with industry is foundational to really our way forward. Whether that's when we think about cybersecurity and the role that industry plays in terms of we're unique in that our domain is a man-made domain largely by Western industry. And how does that allow us to build partnerships that takes advantage of the overall ecosystem? Congress has given us a number of authorities that allow us to now collaborate with industry in terms of information sharing, and we've seen great power in that. The number of cybersecurity advisories that have been done by the National Security Agency that really start to lay out what are the threats, and having industry contribute to that really gives us a sight picture that not only affects government, but allows us to also impact the cybersecurity industry in terms of being able to pass our understanding and synchronize that with the way that industry sees it. But also when we think about protection of our own critical infrastructure, the more that we are able to partner with industry and the ability for us to share and do that at an unclassified level allows us to expand our partnerships and do it rapidly. So I think foundationally, that's one of the areas that we see is the industry partnership is probably the most impactful, whether that's in terms of extending our reach, but also in terms of how we think about the collaboration that can extend not just within the United States, but across the shores.
Great. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about decision advantage. It's about how the joint force makes better and faster decisions than the adversary while disrupting their ability to do the same. How are innovative thinking and innovative tools creating opportunities for a decision advantage in the cyber domain?
Well, I think first and foremost, if I look at it through the lens of the National Security Agency, we owe indications of warning. As a combat support agency, we need to deliver to each of the combatant commanders the ability to have indications of warning so that they are able to position forces and really to be able to understand the threats that they face within the geographic domain. Within Cyber Command, really, we can now take a look at what are the overall authorities that we've been given by Congress, by the department, and how do we use those authorities to put additional capability not just in the hands of US Cyber Command, but across the department. So areas that we see as one of our responsibilities is to be able to provide joint cyber command and control, which starts with the ability to visualize what are the threats to our networks, and also what are the capabilities that we need to be able to share with those combatant commanders and commanders all the way down to tactical echelons to understand the risk that they bear, but also the ability for us to be able to mitigate those threats and to be able to do it in a way that really takes advantage of our unique site picture in NSA and Cyber Command, but enabling all those commanders that are conducting operations around the globe.
Great. I think that's really important, particularly as the speed of warfare accelerates, thanks to non-kinetic means like cyber tools that you use, that our adversaries use, and also thanks to kinetic means like hypersonic munitions. Let's talk about outcomes, about longevity. What are some of the enduring advantages that come from smart investments in innovation?
Well, when we think about enduring advantage, first, what I'm going to think about is our defense industrial base. In terms of what that brings to the overall Department of Defense, that's an area that we've invested a lot of time and a lot of energy, and really for a number of reasons. So when we work with the Defense Industrial Base, one of the things that we've done is a partnership with the DoD CIO, who has asked us to really begin to build a partnership with the Defense Industrial Base that allows us to do a number of things. Share directly cyber threat information with industry, to be able to build collaborative relationships with those industry partners. To date, we've got partnerships with over 1,000 elements of the Defense Industrial Base. And as we work with those teammates, it's now allowing us to establish agreements with them, to be able to share information back and forth, but then also allow us to offer services that are enabling a greater cybersecurity and defense across the industrial base. So for those 1,000 partnerships, we also offer protective DNS that's informed by National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command insights. And it allows us to also offer things like vulnerability scanning, where we can now do a scan for industry, provide it back to them to allow them to mitigate risk. So that's one core enduring advantage, which is how we think about our defense industrial base. The longest term enduring advantage that we have to be stewards of is the talent we have in our workforces. In NSA and Cyber Command, we have a unique workforce that is really our foundation. Highly technical, the ability to be able to operate and integrate technology quickly. How do we continue to cultivate that, and how do we grow? Congress has given us some unique authorities that have allowed us to now hire data scientists. Being able to capitalize on those authorities, bringing in the right sets of skills to allow us to partner with industry and also partner with other programs in the department. The other thing that the department has done is given us additional authorities for cyber accepted service, which is really about cultivating our civilian workforce. And then lastly is our military workforce that we're working really closely with across the department to ensure the readiness of the force as we take on more and more responsibilities for advanced training. So I'll touch on those two, as the defense industrial base and our people are really two foundational areas that we see as enduring advantage.
Okay. Let's shift gears again. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. Obviously, this expo is about artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a large topic that we've talked about here yesterday and a bit today at the Ash Carter Exchange. How are Cybercom and NSA approaching AI, and what are some of your key tenets?
So I think, David, the first thing that we start with is we start with civil liberties and privacy. So when we take a look at these tools, we do have a long history of working with AI and ML in the National Security Agency. And foundationally, one of the things that is different for us than it is for industry is that we are first going to be thinking about how do we ensure the protection of American civil liberties and privacy, while we're also thinking about the safe and ethical use. So we do try to integrate these technologies quickly, but we're going to be deliberate to ensure that we're handling the data correctly, consistent with our values. Then the next piece is, where do we get within, so once we've really got a good understanding of what that looks like, We've got a long history in how we leverage it in cybersecurity, but increasingly based off the threats we see today, we now have to integrate different sets of data. When we look at threats like China's, the PRCs living off the land, which is something we've reported with industry at great detail about the techniques they're using that would potentially target, which is targeting our critical infrastructure and also potentially our military networks. That takes a different set of data to be able to detect and combine with other cybersecurity data sets that we've used traditionally. So being able to use artificial intelligence and machine learning to allow us to be able to identify those heuristic activities is an area that we see as an opportunity for us to accelerate and counter and expose that class of activity.
So why AI now? What makes this a timely conversation for the organizations that you run?
So I think first, if we just look at the environment that we're operating in, it is an environment that we really are characterized by three different things that are going on simultaneously. Russia, Ukraine, clearly going to set the what it looks like in European security for the next decades. And so, how we look at data in terms of being able to assist in Ukraine's defense, in from a cybersecurity perspective, and then also to support European command in terms of understanding the intelligence picture there. That's one set of demands. Second set of demands is what is happening today. It was started October 7th by the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel, followed by the Israel response in Gaza, has really set a landscape in the Middle East that now we are very focused on force protection of our forces. We are seeing the evolution of threats in the Red Sea, but we are also focused on assisting in the defense of Israel. So, again, another really consequential challenge. The third is, of course, our pacing challenge, which we have maintained strategic discipline on throughout these activities. But when you start, and so when we think about the PRC and how much we are committing to ensure that we are able to do indications of warning for Indo-PACOM, but also to inform policymakers, each of those activities are enormously consequential and the potential to use an enormous amount of resource. How we leverage technology to make sure that we're putting our workforce in the best position to do all the roles and missions that we have across the National Security Agency and U.S. Cyber Command is really one of the areas that I think from a perspective of organizations that are built on a foundation of technology, we're really well postured to be able to balance those different activities and fully leverage technology to do so.
Okay. Zooming out a bit, you've been at Cybercom for nearly 2 years now, first as the deputy commander, and now you've been in the seat for the last 3 months as the commander, as combatant commander. And of course, you're dual-hatted as director of the NSA. Looking to the future, what's your path forward? How are you, more specifically, trying to achieve unity of effort, unity of action across your organizations?
So when I think about unity of action, it's a really good question, David, because I think if first for people that aren't aware, that if I just touch on the roles and missions of both organizations, I think it's really important to set the foundation as we think about what is the potential of growing unity of action. From an NSA perspective, two core missions: signals intelligence, being able to be the SIGINT functional manager for the nation in terms of executing signals intelligence operations to produce foreign intelligence. Second mission, cybersecurity, the ability for being the national manager for national security systems, as well as the nation's lead for cryptographic material for national security systems. Cyber Command, three core missions: the ability to defend the Department of Defense Information Network, defend the nation in cyberspace from adversary hackers, and to support the joint force in terms of being able to generate offensive and defensive cyber options. So when you look at those roles and missions, incredibly complementary. But the authorities that have been given to NSA from a cybersecurity perspective, and then the commander of U.S. Cyber Command to be able to set the conditions for the department in terms of our configuration and how we set our networks, we set the globe, we set our theaters if we're in crisis, those opportunities to be able to mesh those authorities and use them in a coherent way really brings us opportunity to put the department in the best position, working very closely with the DoD CIO and the other combatant commands, as well as those roles and missions that really go beyond that in terms of our setting the conditions for all of our classified systems in the U.S. government. It really does give us opportunity to be thinking about uh, from both organizations, how do we bring those authorities together to be able to drive action that makes us more secure, be able to identify quickly vulnerabilities, and to be able to close them in a way that allows us to move at greater speed and agility. So I think from a unity of effort perspective, internal to the organizations, we have a lot of opportunity. Foundational to be able to extend that are our partnerships, whether those be with our domestic agencies in CISA or the FBI for a number of the missions that we collaboratively execute, or it's about how we operate with our industry partners in terms of then being able to share our insights or to collaborate to close vulnerabilities.
Okay, and one final question to close things out, General. As you look at the wars in Ukraine and in the Middle East, what are some of the lessons that you're drawing with respect to cyber operations?
So if I first look at Russia, Ukraine, I think it's really an area for us that we have to make sure that we don't get anchored in the initial lessons from Russia, Ukraine. This has been an evolving conflict. And if I think back to the initial days in the conflict and what the narrative was around Russia's use of cyber, in general, I think Russia's use of cyber looked an awful like all their domains, poorly planned and not integrated. Also, the early defense by Ukraine, supported by a number of nations, put them in a position to be very well defended. We now need to watch how the conflict has continued to evolve. And areas that I think we need to really understand is how Russia has evolved in using their cyber forces. And I think it's one we're watching closely, and in many ways want to ensure that we take away the right lessons of how they've applied their cyber forces as it's evolved. And I think what we will increasingly see is an understanding of how cyber has participated in giving them increasing intelligence insights. And I think it's something we have to ensure that we take away the right lessons as the conflict has evolved. When we look at Israel and also involvement from Iran around the crisis, and we look at there was a period of time early where there were various Israeli capabilities that were targeted that happened to be in the United States critical infrastructure. And it's a good example of what it means for us to be able to respond quickly, to be able to attribute what those activities are, and then to be able to work with CISA and FBI to be able to close those vulnerabilities in our homeland, all while being able to ensure that we are working very closely to defend our own networks, be able to identify threats, and to be able to communicate those threats to combatant commands, to our interagency colleagues, as well as our allies and our foreign partners. So I think in each case, the ability to collaborate and share is one of the foundational lessons from both. And the ability to also operate at speed with partners is a critical component that we need to take away in terms of how we'll operate if the United States were the element that were involved in a conflict. How do we need to respond? How do we need to defend? And how do we need to be able to generate options at a pace that are supportive of both our policymakers and combatant commands?
Well, General, thank you very much for your time. It's been a pleasure having you here. We really appreciate you joining us at the late hour where you are.
David, thanks for having me. Have an absolutely wonderful day.
Thank you, sir.